on UCINet all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, people just send me an email and say, how do you do this? Rather than write it all down, I just do a quick
That would be very helpful.
1-minute video. So we're actually recording right now. So I would avoid certain things. I don't know. Try not to say certain things. So today we are doing sociocentric data. So it's basically collecting and entering data. After that, we get into centrality. So I sort of think of this as the cutoff point where we've been talking about generalities and what network analysis is all about. And then we finally get to the concepts and methods next week. I wanted to point out one thing in the schedule. The schedule has changed a little bit from when I had it originally, and that's because on the 20th of March, I was supposed to be here, but in fact, I'm going to be in Guatemala. So somebody's going to come in from communications, a guy named Andy Pilney, who is a wonderful speaker, and he's going to introduce you to Ergum and Siena, which is that SEOM thing, that's stochastic actor-oriented models. This is a topic which, in a semester, it would be very difficult for me to learn those models in one semester. So you're going to get like 2.5 hours of it, but you can at least get exposed to it, and then maybe get interested later on, take a workshop in it. Our summer workshop, and hopefully people know that we have a summer workshop. It's a week-long workshop on networks. It has multiple tracks. One of the tracks is a 4-day track on Ergum and Siena. You can take that if you want to go further. Also in the workshop, there will be other kind of 2.5-hour introductions to each of those as well. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. I see. Okay, yeah, because when I was moving things around, I screwed it up. Okay. Thank you so much. I will fix that so that people don't go to spring break on the wrong week. I don't want you to show up in Florida and there's nobody there, So, and let's see. So after that, we'll do also crop regression, which is also another statistical technique. So these are the only 2 statistical days, and the rest is more conceptual and more techniques, clustering, block modeling, which is all about finding people who are structurally similar to each other. Then a day on egocentric research, and actually that local social capital. This is really structural holes here, sort of a whole class on that. And I've listed class presentations here. We haven't really talked about that. First, let me make sure, based on your knowledge, that still is within regular school, right? It's not, the end of school is after that, right? Okay. So that's a regular class time. I happen to like class presentations. I like to see what people are doing, and we usually do them incredibly informally and without, pretensions that we've learned something important and so, but just sort of saying, here's what I was interested in, here's kind of what I did. On the other hand, we have a lot of people in this class, so we certainly couldn't do everybody's presentation. What we could do is restrict it to the people who are registered for the class, or we could make it voluntary, or we could skip it altogether. By the time we get to that at the end of the semester, we'll have missed many things. We'll have run late on so many things that we could use as a catch-up day. So I'd like you to think about that a little bit, and then I'll poll you again and say what you have it. I would like to have the presentations, and we'll make them short. We'll see what happens. Okay, so for today, sociocentric data. A couple of things to note: that we have a bunch of data that we'll use in class today, right up here. And and here's an example of a YouTube tutorial right here that just shows how to import data. And we're going to do that in class as well. And I don't know if you've noticed the bibliographies and stuff, but for example, if you were to click on BKS informant accuracy, let's see. It's got, in very small letters, a stream of research, and they should be in chronological order. They're too small for me to see, but it's an interesting thing to read because it's one of the few examples of real science that you find in social sciences, in the sense that the first article points to a problem. And the problem is that when you have controlled situations and you know exactly who interacted with whom and how much, and then you ask people, who did you interact with and how much, you find that people are dead wrong. About 50% of what they tell you is not right. And these are all special cases like deaf people who only communicate with each other via a teleprompter, and so it records, it has a log of who talked to whom. Check these things. And so, that produced then a reaction from people whose now livelihood is threatened, because it basically says network data is useless. And then people trying to come to the defense of it with, interesting defenses like, well, maybe they don't get every tie right, but if you analyze the perceived network, the structures that emerge are the same as in the real network. So maybe it doesn't matter that certain ties were not right. Other people, like the physicists like Mark Newman, took this to mean that, well, okay, we can't do surveys. And so he says, but we've discovered a brand new way of collecting ties that's much more accurate. And what that way is we do co-authorships. And that's a really interesting thing to say from a social science point of view. First of all, co-authorships is one very specific domain. It's not like who do you trust and who's getting along with whom in a small group, and it only applies to academics. The other is the notion that just because those are objective and we can be sure that there's a co-authorship or not, doesn't mean that we know how to interpret those ties. What does it mean that it's like being a Facebook friend. I have a paper in which I didn't meet one of my co-authors until several years later. In fact, it was really great because it was at the Academy of Management. I was in the elevator. Guy read my tag. He said, "Oh, Steve Borgatti, I wrote a paper with you." And I'm like, "Oh, hi, Denny Joya." And everybody in the elevator was laughing at like this idea that these co-authors had never met. And so the physicists took one lesson from this. But it's a very interesting process by which people come, and then at the end of all this, pretty much is the article that I had you read, which was the article by Freeman, this one here, which basically suggests that no matter what you ask people, who did you talk to in the last 3 months, they always answer, who do you usually talk to, in indeterminate past and present. It's very similar to marketing. If you ask people, what was the last brand of mustard that you bought? They give a name, and then you do a pantry check. And you actually go in and look into their pantry, and you go, that mustard there, that's not the one you said to me. And they go, oh, yeah, right. Well, that's the one I usually get. But, last week, my aunt was in town, and she bought this other one. Right? So people don't answer what they last bought. They answer what they usually bought. And as long as that's what you care about, it's okay. If you really cared about who they talked to last week, that's difficult. All right, so let's do a little bit of slides, and then we'll do a lot of playing on the computer. Let's start here. Looks good. So, the Finnish farmers. I did a study. You can see the reference at the bottom. I used to teach in Finland every year, and so we studied. My co-authors were interested in the adoption of organic farming, and it was sort of something that was happening at the time, kind of a wave of it. And we wanted to know if we could predict who was going to adopt and when they were going to adopt. And so what we did was we got a sense. We went to the government, and the government in Finland has records on everything, like all Scandinavian countries. And we got a list of all farmers in this province of North Karelia. And then we also took from government records their land and who was neighboring with whom. And so that became our tie was, are you neighbors with this person or not? And we also knew from government records how much of their production was organic. And so we could see when they became organic and when they dropped off and how much they were doing and so on. And then we did a little statistical study of sort of the autocorrelation of organic farming. And again, I say the word autocorrelation mostly because I want you to remember it for the future. I know I've said this before. But the idea is that if you've got a network, in this case, it's actually kind of a physical network in the sense that these are spatial as much as it is network tied. But the question that you're interested in is if you have two states, organic and non-organic, does it turn out that there's some kind of clumping so that you have patterns like this, where more than you'd expect by chance, the dark nodes tend to be connected to other dark nodes. Now they may be also connected to other white nodes and so on, but there's statistically a greater chance of dark with dark and light with light. That's called autocorrelation. And you can even do it with the amounts of stuff.
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what autocorrelation is, and in this case it's network autocorrelation, is the tendency for adjacent nodes to have the same state. So this one's organic, and somebody that they're connected to is organic, and somebody else that they're connected to is organic. And you can even do it with sort of the quantities. How much of their produce is organic? This could be a big organic producer. This would tend to be somewhat phase 2. This one might be smaller, and even smaller, and so on. And you can see this gradation that as you go away from some big node, you get smaller and smaller quantities of whatever that state is. So, and this is originally developed in the study of things like cholera, where you see these spatial patterns that in this neighborhood suddenly you've got a lot of cholera, and of course that was traced out in the groundwater. So we're looking for autocorrelation, so basically we build a statistical model of autocorrelation, and we find that in fact there's a strong connection. Well, it's not a strong connection. There's a connection that people who have organic neighbors tend to go organic. And the more organic neighbors you have, the more likely you are to go organic sooner than later. Now, because we were in Finland, the obvious thing to do was to collect all this data from government records. It's so much easier. But I was trained as an anthropologist, so after that, I got everybody to go and interview the farmers. So we went and interviewed a whole bunch of the farmers, and we asked them about their process of deciding to be organic. And it turned out that actually, while there was some role that was played by the neighbors, the biggest role was people who were not farmers. So it was their families, for example, the farmer's family, and particularly their children, who said, "Dad, you got to go organic. This is how we want to eat. We don't want to eat all those pesticides and things like that." So it turns out that in this study, we really had the wrong population. Now there was a significant effect. So maybe that had some kind of, maybe the children say, "We really want you to go organic." They provide the motivation, but the farmer is still not going to just leap to it because they need to know whether is it feasible. How are you doing once you go organic? Are you making money? And so then they consult some of their neighbors, and they look around, and maybe that's where the influence comes in. But the original motivation was elsewhere. So I just want to point out that that study was misdesigned because we had the wrong population. It's kind of like if you're trying to understand what's going on with old people. Let's say old people and health outcomes, how many times they need to go to the doctor, you're trying to predict that based on their network patterns. Do you automatically just talk to a sample of all old people? Probably not, because they're talking to people who are young, they're talking to families, they're talking to friends, all kinds of people. It's not just old people. So, well, how would you have done this study? Knowing what I've told you, what would you do for this? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? So if you're looking at like an organizational setting, right, where you've got a group of people bounded, I guess, by that structure,
Yeah.
is it better then to not limit responses to the organizational setting, right? And if
Well-
that's the case, would that not be a whole network study? Would that be like an egocentric network study?
Yes, that's basically what I say in the next two slides. Exactly
Okay.
that. Let me, well, here's something this is something that Holman said a long time ago and picked up by Feld. This is from a paper that is arguing, they're trying to present a new technique for dividing up a network into clusters. And it's a technique that divides them into mutually exclusive clusters. And one of the questions that always arises is, yeah, but aren't people members of overlapping groups? Does it make sense to like partition them? And so here's what they said. So here's what Holman said. Holman says, from an individual-centered perspective, groups would almost certainly overlap. Any particular individual would be likely to have a group at work, another one at home, in a family setting, and so on. But Holman's argued that sociologists do not focus on these. They're very into, in those days, defining, this is what sociology does, that's what psychology does. Two fields are separate. Are located in particular contexts, like work at home, and are limited to particular time frames, like working hours or evenings. And when groups are defined in different contexts, they usually overlap very little. So there are contexts that we can find where most of the stuff that's happening is within that context. So at work, for example, it makes sense to look at their interactions with other work and so on. Now, but you just always have to be aware that some of the research questions you might be asking really impinge on something else. So if you're studying turnover, for example, the employee's relationships with other employees is important, but the fact that the spouse is moving to Akron for another job has a huge impact on what they do. And so it would be a mistake to just miss out on that part of it. So for the Corellia study, I think that we could have done this as an egocentric study, although we would have missed this part perhaps, especially since their ties to other farmers might not be very strong. And so when you're asking who are the people in your life, you might actually miss some of those because you've only asked about 10 people or something, and they're putting families. So for this, I would suggest maybe some kind of a hybrid study. So where you've got a whole network, which is the farmers, and then you've got an add-on study, which is an ego network study on the same people. So at the end of the survey, suddenly you switch gears and you say, okay, forget about all those farmers that I was just showing you. Let's talk about the important people in your life, or the other way around. And one thing about ego network studies is that they're cheap, so you can always add those on. So I showed you this on the first day, actually not in table form, but we talked about the differences between full network design and personal network design, or egocentric. This is sociocentric, that's egocentric over there. And some of the differences are that, in the ego network design, you can take random samples, which is huge, because that means you can also generalize to the population that you randomly sampled from. When you do a whole network study of the marketing department at a mattress company, that's kind of the population. You could pretend that, well, it's representative of all marketing departments in other mattress companies or across all firms, but it's unlikely to be true. You didn't actually sample those people. So that's nice. The other thing is that in an egocentric design, everybody can be anonymous. So you can tell me that, yeah, a big influence on me is Sid, and I don't need to know who Sid is. Let's see. You can find certain things with egocentric designs. There are some things that you can't. So if you really need to know the structure, you need to know about things like being central in this larger structure, you're going to have to go with full network design. Which is why I think in that Finland study, I'd want to go with a hybrid. Because this is kind of interesting, having structure, very much like when we talked about the Moscow case. But the ego networks is also important. And almost in any study of influence, an ego network add-on is really helpful because you want to get the whole set of people who influence you, not just the people in a particular context. Now, it may be that for some kinds of things, like whether you adopt certain kinds of, let's say you're in a hospital situation and they're training doctors with simulation techniques. So they put them in a situation and something goes wrong and they have to figure out, diagnose what's going on and so on. Whether the doctors adopt that or not might be entirely a function of their discussions with other doctors. It may be that their spouses just have nothing to do with that. They don't discuss that with their children and things like that. So you don't have to add that ego network part to it. If you do a full network study like this, you run into the problem of autocorrelation. And this autocorrelation now is not the autocorrelation of is not the autocorrelation that I'm talking about here in a sense. Well, it is the same autocorrelation, but in the first sense, autocorrelation was the dependent variable that we're studying, trying to figure out whether there is contagion from group to group. But in other contexts, if we're just trying to, for example, relate having the same state with being the same gender, then our data are not independent of each other. This pair is not independent of this pair because they both involve these, this node. So statistically what we have a problem with is that the observations are not independent, and we're going to have to do something very fancy to avoid that. Quite complicated, as we'll see. Much more than in other settings where, say, if you're familiar with multi-level models, you are aware that if you study children's performance and they're clustered by schools, that the people within one school are going to be more similar to each other than the people in another school, so you have to deal with that. That's simple levels of non-independence. This is much more complex. The other thing is if we go with the whole network thing, we're going to deal with the boundary specification problem. We've got to decide who's going to be in our network. And maybe this is the time to advance some of my pet peeves and biases. Just remember, it was Amanda, I think, that said emerging networks, and I was like, oh, don't say that, I hate emerging networks. I have the belief that ties are real, I said this before, but that networks are made up. Okay? I think of networks as being a mathematical object. They're an analytical tool. I do think that people have friendships, and people are brothers of others and so on. But the moment you say, this thing is a network, that's something that you added to the world, right? It's sort of like saying, is this wood? Yeah, it's a piece of wood. Is it a table? Well, nothing in nature tells you it's a table. Because the table is defined by its function, humans, as you put things on, so on. So, the boundary specification problem often comes up when people say, well, I need to know what the boundaries of my network are. Well, there are no boundaries to your network. Your network, you define that. The moment you as a researcher say, I'm interested in studying the marketing department at IBM, I want to look at friendship ties among them, you have defined the network. The real question that's coming up, the real confusion, is that people are confusing a network with a group. Groups, sociological groups, have boundaries. Now, they're always contested, and they're always fuzzy, and it's always difficult. You still have problems finding the boundaries. But part of the group concept is that it does have a boundary. There are in-group members, out-group members, and so on. So often, what we do in whole network study is that we're studying a natural group of some kind. Natural may be too strong a word. It could be a neighborhood gang, it could be an academic department in a university, a whole organization, whatever it is, there's some sense of boundary to it naturally. And then you study the pattern within it. So every group that you study has a network structure. Okay, I'll keep coming back to that. Because thinking of it that way will get you out of a lot of problems. And one of the problems is the emerging network thing. So when networks got popular, right after 9/11, the U.S. government said, oh, we have a new kind of enemy out there. It's not a state. It's a network. Al-Qaeda is a network. And so we need to, in fact, typical human thinking. So we need to reorganize our military to be a network as well, because you need a network to fight a network. Magical thinking. But so one of the things that they really wanted to find out, and they put out a lot of requests for proposals, was how can we predict when networks will converge? And from my point of view, that's a ridiculous question, because networks are defined. They're not emergent. There might be a group that emerges, and it might have a network structure, but it's not the network itself. And if you look at models of network change, and network emergence, as people say, what they really are is models of how ties change. So you can have a set of people, and you can have ties start to develop, and clumps develop, and you can model the formation of ties. But you're not modeling emergence of the network, you're modeling the emergence of ties. Okay, end of soapbox. So, here's a question that many people want to know the answer to. What sociometric questions should I ask? I'm doing a network analysis. What questions should I ask? And the assumption is that there are some canonical questions that have been proven to be good questions. To me, again, it's a funny thing to do, because it's sort of like saying, I'm interested in studying attitudes. Which attitude should I ask? Depends on what you're studying. Right? It's not like there's some true set of attitudes that you as a researcher have to get to. But it seems like with networks, people do think that there's some kind of real underlying network, and if you just ask the right questions, it will reveal itself. But the thing to realize is that any question that you ask that's relational, whenever you ask somebody, what is your relationship with somebody else? In what way, what do you think about somebody else? You've created a network you can then study. So I give you an example here for somebody who just emailed me 3 days ago. Is it okay to change the wordings of the name generators you suggested, as you suggested? I worry about straying too far from the GSS. The GSS is the General Social Survey. It's a survey that's given to 1,500 Americans every other year, been done since 1929. And they typically have a network question. They ask people, so who are they give you 5 slots, and they say, who are the people that you discuss important matters with? And then they ask a few questions about them, what gender they are, what religion, and so on. And so that's become, in many people's minds, the way that you do network analysis. You ask, who do you discuss important matters with? I suggested in his case, and this is the survey about the NFL football players, that he modify it for that context. But he's concerned about doing that, worried about straying too far from that. You should not be worried about that. You should be picking the questions that make sense for your research, not the ones that were somehow canonized by some famous paper. Yes, it's risky to go on your own, because people will criticize and say, is that validated? But it's even more wrong to take something that is patently inapplicable, but which will pass muster because people go, oh yeah, Powell 1966. Okay, so ontology of networks, that's the discussion about whether networks are real or not. And on the importance of pretest, yes. Well, show you a set of studies here. This is by Daly. He's a very prominent networks and education person. And particularly, he studies sort of education management. He's a very thorough guy. So, and he was very much aware that every question that you ask generates a different network, and all of those have different functions and different structures. So he asked these course administrators 22 separate kinds of time. All right. So these are some of his questions. Who do you collaborate with? Who would you go to for getting a scoop on the district? Would you turn to for confidential help? Would you go to in help thinking through new work challenges? Would you consider a friend? Would you consider you a friend? Who do you go to because they're helpful in innovation? How often are they helpful to you in innovation? How often do you go to somebody to innovate and brainstorm innovations with? So on and so forth. 22 of these. Now this sounds like a good practice. Okay, this is very different from Mark Newman saying, you know what, forget about all those different things the social sciences have tried. We have one objective kind of tie, and it is co-authorship. So let's just reduce it all to that because it's real. We can measure that. This guy says, no, all these things are different. I better measure them all. But here's the interesting thing. So we've got 22 separate matrices that are all square. They're all 58 by 58. So what I did was I reformatted the data into a typical cases by variables matrix. And the variables are the 22 different relations. And the cases are pairs of people. So I took this first row, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, and I wrote it down here. I wrote it 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. And then I took the next row and I put it down here. And then the next row, and the next row, all the way down until you have 58 times 57 rows. 58 times 57 because I didn't count ties to people to themselves. So we've got this big, long, beautiful matrix. And then I did correlations among the columns, did a factor analysis. And the factor analysis gives us 4 factors, but 3 of them are really nuisance factors. One factor absolutely dominates. The eigenvalue is 5 times the size of the second largest eigenvalue. And you can see here's the actual loadings of all these different social relations on the first factor, and they're all loading pretty high and so on. What this says is that you have the permission, you have the evidence to support clumping them all together into one very well measured social relation. They're all going the same way. It's not like you've got some that measure something that's completely independent of or orthogonal to some other relation. They all measure loosely the same thing. Some of them are better representatives than others, so that info dec and info think are really highly. This was getting a little bit low, although most of the time a 0.54 loading is considered good enough. So all of that work, and yet it turns out that basically there's only one underlying relation. And I don't know what that relation is, but it's something like, who do you deal with at school? In a way, now, had you only asked one item, had you only asked that one question, who do you deal with at school, you might not have gotten as accurate a picture as you will by summing all these together or averaging them together. But basically, it could have been stood into that. So here was kind of like overkill. And this could have been prevented by a pretest. Right? So what you want to do in a real study is you think to yourself, theoretically, I really need to know who they collaborate with, and separately, it's really important to understand who they get energy from when they interact with them. These are different concepts. Now, theoretically, they might be different, but empirically, the respondents can't tell the difference. Okay? So you do a pretest on some other sample, and you find out that, in fact, they're highly correlated with each other, and you don't need them all. Okay? So you can reduce that strongly advise doing pre-testing and doing network studies. As you know, the words that we use for social relations are fuzzy. If I ask you, who are your friends? Each person has a slightly different definition of friends, and their cultural differences are massive. Right? We do studies, it's the same study, we do it in the US, in Germany, we ask the same questions. You ask US managers, who are your friends at work? Check off all kinds of people. Just got tons of friends at work. If you ask German managers who are your friends, you get almost none. One reason is that in Germany, having friends at work is kind of sort of illicit. It's like, I have colleagues at work. I'm not like colluding with my friends and doing this kind of, cronyism. I'm professional. So it's really hard to compare. So you've got to pre-test these different things and figure out what's just the right wording to get at what you want.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you said for a whole network study, you really need 80%, right, for it to be publishable?
Yeah, that's been kind of a heuristic out there.
So what if you do a study that's like hybrid and you end up not getting 80% response rate, but that would still make your egocentric network data valid, right?
Egocentric is perfect, yeah.
So would you still publish that?
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't have what you would consider an adequate sample
Yeah,
size?
so suppose the response rate was below 80%, 60%. And I'm going to show you some imputation techniques today so that we can try to get some of those missing respondents back. But yeah, the egocentric part I would publish without a question. This is not, it's subject to the usual things. Why the non-response? Is it systematic? You're getting non-response from women, and getting response from men, that's going to bias the results. But given that they're not any different from the ones who did respond, no problem there. And then for the network analysis, the whole network analysis, one of the things that you would do is probably do a little bit of Monte Carlo and try modifying the network and say, well, what if I had these extra people here and I gave them these random ties here? Would it change my conclusions? And in many networks, the structure is so strong that really the fact that you missed these 18 people doesn't change much. Now, I can always show you pathological cases where it changes everything. If you have a network that looks like this, the one I showed you before, and this person doesn't respond, it looks like a really different network. It looks like two dyads. Right? On the other hand, though, just because they didn't respond doesn't mean we don't have data about them. All these other people said that they had ties with this person. So, which I learned the hard way a long time ago when I did a study, and a woman in an organization, a woman objected strenuously, I'm not doing this study. Fine, you have to do the study. And, but we didn't think to take her off of the roster. So people were still able to choose her. And guess what? She was really central in the who do you find it difficult to work with? So ethically, that was really problematic what I did. I should have removed her from the study altogether as a stimulus and as a response. Okay, so I actually can't choose it. Christy, can you try to press this button on my laptop?
Oh, sure.
Okay, and I probably can't scroll. So here's that survey that I sent you guys, and I don't mean to bias you, but it is by a neurologist from Harvard University. Considered, it's got a little higher ranking than we do. This ought to be good, right? But somebody responded to my email and said, this survey is hilarious. So I want to know, what is your reaction to it, and why would you think it's hilarious? So let's go downward a little bit. Yeah.
talk about, like, what is the purpose of this study?
Yes.
Which is even weirder.
Oh, which is even, because I sent you the little bit, right, about, yeah. So tell me about that part.
Well, so, what they want to study is the effect of traumatic brain injury, and they think that the network is going to affect how bad off these football players are in terms of, I guess, what they're going to see in their brains.
I think probably also more widely, how do they get along in society? Do they get, are they able to function and so on?
Yeah.
So general health outcomes.
Yeah. But they, I think, are even thinking long term of going in that direction of actually seeing if it affects the brain at all.
Mm-hmm.
All of it is just very odd, and especially when you see then what they actually choose to try to survey.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, they were just going to ask the players,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of makes no sense.
Yes, I think all of the, now, this is an ego network study. So the people that they're going to mention don't have to be other players.
I would assume that
Yep.
most of the people that are affected, if you have traumatic brain injury, are not other players.
Right.
They're family, friends, but that's not who they're looking to serve.
No, so what they're saying is that, well, how much social support you've got basically is going to kind of moderate, the effects of your brain trauma. Right? And that so that if you've got more social support, it's going to make things easier, better in some way. And it is interesting to think about if it's actually in terms of the brain trauma itself. We know that the brain can rewire itself for a lot of different things, but it is a stretch to think that having friendships would change the trauma that's in your brain. But let's go back to your first statement, which I thought was interesting, that you were basically saying, look, the questions have to connect with their goals. And you were saying that the questions don't seem that relevant. So let's go through the questions. Oh, and we're recording everything that I'm saying about this poor guy. Jesus. God. So we got a bunch of demographics. Great. People in your life. So only use first names, nicknames, or initials. From time to time, most people discuss important personal matters with other people. This is the GSS question reworded. Looking back over the last 3 months, who are the adults with whom you have discussed an important personal matter? All right, what do we see about that? Any comments on that question? It's too long, that question. So is it because it's got 2 paragraphs here? Because I think the first paragraph is meant to introduce the entire section. And then the actual question here is just the time-to-time one. Yeah, they probably should have. They should have made it a new section, and then the person has to click something to go on to the actual question. I agree. All right, what else?
It just seems kind of sterile to me. I mean, we're wanting to know about the flow of support for somebody with traumatic brain problems. I'd want to be more topic specific. I think I'd want to get their emotions engaged as you work through these things. Who you gather strength from? Who are you encouraged by? Who are you? I mean, it just seems kind of sterile.
So, well, okay. There's 2 separate aspects of the sterility part, which I agree with. It's just so dry. But the other part is what you're saying is, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you should be asking them directly. Who do you discuss medical matters with? Who do you discuss your physical condition with? Does everybody agree with that?
I mean, I don't think you would want to limit it to adults, maybe?
That's another interesting point. I agree with you. I'm not sure I would limit it. I am not sure that I would limit it to people that you discuss health things with, because I think, for example, I have a traditional marriage. I work every day outside the home. My wife is at home, and we're like an economic unit, right? I can get more done than most people because much of my life is taken care of by my wife. Right? She handles the finances and all that. So if I'm dealing with some kind of a crisis, whether it's a work crisis or health crisis and so on, it's easier for me to do it than people who are having to, make the doctor's appointment and pick up the child and do all these kinds of things at the same time. So I think those other people are relevant, even if you're not discussing medical matters with them. But I certainly want to have one question in here that directly addressed that. That's for sure. Anything else about that question?
Even taking a step back, this is not the kind of topic that you would do a survey on, that you would email somebody. So when, for example, I sent you that stuff, if I've got, let's say, an elderly person who's beginning to experience dementia, I'm not going to send them an online survey. Instead, I'm going to design a study where I've got iPads, I'm sending somebody to the person's house, gathering data not just from the person but also the people around them. And that is the entire design is just bizarre. I mean, I would really go into that community and family psychology literature and look for best practices on the type of design that I would use to gather, because it's not just what's the impact on ego, but really all of the alters in that network are being affected by what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So it's partly an interviewing technique that you're saying, or how do you administer the survey, but also the element of actually interviewing all the alters. So, here, even if they did it by the way they're doing it, they could still now get contact information and try to contact the alters, because here it might be really important because the person themselves just doesn't know. They don't see that they're blacking out every few minutes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay.
I think that that's where they say please only use first names, nicknames, or initials. I think by giving people all of those options, they might go back and forth between them. So for someone, maybe they use the first name, for another person it's a nickname, for another person it's initials, and so that can get really confusing, not only for the person who is reading the survey data afterwards, but I would think also maybe for the person who's been taking the survey, and they'd be like, wait, who was I talking about again? So I think maybe it's checking, they can use either first names, nicknames, or initials, but just stick with a consistent format.
Stick with some kind of naming convention. I think that's a good idea. That might help.
Wouldn't it be a good idea to borrow your notion, make that a pretest, so you start using the right language? In other words, get the qualitative information before you write the survey. I'm thinking of I can't recall the author right now, a pretty famous sociology study that was done at U of Chicago. And they went out and did these interviews with all pre-programmed questions, and they weren't even in the right language. They just weren't connecting at all. And I would think something this complex, you might find, for example, the language they use to describe their condition, how they're feeling, or the way they draw on people for support might totally change the way you ask the question.
Great. And actually, that reminds me that you notice that the question has the last 3 months. That's one of those things where you never know ahead of time whether that's the right period. Maybe you need the last 6 months in order to capture anything. Yeah.
And also, too, a lot of people have a hard time remembering what they did, but they're very good at predicting what they would do. So maybe instead of asking who did you talk to, you could say 2 or 5 people that, if you had a medical issue right now, that you would go talk to. Yes. And so that would get perceptions of the current network and not maybe what they perceived the network to be, 3 months ago.
Yeah. That was one of my suggestions to him, was to change this to a kind of a indefinite time period of who do you usually talk to about these kinds of things? Because first of all, if they actually did remember who it was in the last 3 months, those may have been through sampling error, just the wrong people. They're not the usual people. And then second, probably they can't remember that anyway. They're gonna answer the long-term idea anyway. That's what the Freeman paper seems to suggest. Yes.
I have a concern with this study, maybe because I don't understand the whole situation where they're studying, but social support studies in psychology that use ego networks show that many times it's not important how many people you have, but that support, maybe you just have one person in your life that brings all support to you, and that's enough. I quite don't understand why they are separating like the social network questions from the social support questions when they could like bring them together.
Meaning that they could derive the social support from the network questions?
Yes.
Yes, it's interesting because it looks like they're covering their bases by saying, look, I know there's a social support literature that doesn't even use network questions.
Yes.
It's just like, how many people do you think you have that can help?
Yes, like these questions that are below that say like how we're going to ask about how much support you have from people in general.
Yeah.
So these are relevant questions in the social support literature, but when we have networks, we can mix them.
Yes. But at least here, with having them both, maybe we can actually empirically look at the two and see, how well correlated they are. Network analysts have always been very negative towards the social support stuff, saying, look, you can't just ask people how much support you have. You have to just ask them about individuals, and then you as the researcher pull together how much social support there is. Sort of like burnout in the sense that you ask people self-reported stuff, but it's the researcher that adds it all together and says, this guy's got a burnout score of 7. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it matter how much actual social support there is, or does it matter how much perceived social support there is?
That's such an interesting question. Yeah.
I mean, I could get a lot of social support, but if I don't think it's very helpful, and so I don't perceive it as being supportive, then does it matter?
Sure. You might be depressed and you might not feel like you're going to get through this. You don't have the optimism that you need. And the other way around might also be true, that just thinking that you've got the support gets you through things. On the other hand, if you don't actually have people that are going to take care of your dog while you go in for your chemo, and don't have people that are going to, get food for your kids and so on, it's the real social support that matters there. So actually, both probably matter.
I think it's almost kind of use both of those kind of almost check against each other,
Mhm.
right? To see how closely people perceive perceptions of the social support they get, how closely they align with the actual support that they say that they're receiving.
Yeah. I would also consider in these kinds of studies being much more specific. I would start with a little ethnographic study of the football players and so on, what kinds of issues are going on, and finding out what kinds of support matter, and then asking about those kinds. Support in general is just very vague. We don't know what they're answering.
There's a lot of research and communication about this, especially with regard to cancer patients.
Oh, yeah?
Survivors.
Okay. So, and actually, I should point out to Joe that they're just NFL players. They haven't necessarily shown any problems yet. But the thought is that they're getting hit in the head daily, and this is probably causing some undiagnosed brain trauma. So they want to see whether, this is going to eventually add up to some real problems, brain shrinkage and so on. So they're trying to see whether, in fact, because they've already shown in a previous study that the social support did affect people with major trauma. So what about these people who have this minor trauma that hasn't even been diagnosed yet? But which, the trauma or the social support?
Yeah, what it's supposed to be. The social support.
Ah.
What's it supposed to be?
That's the mechanisms not listed.
Good question.
Yes.
Because if you don't know what you're expecting the social supporter to be doing for you, then the questions, I don't know. I don't know what questions.
Well,
to ask.
they may have a theory, but in fact, I wrote back and said, so in fact, the process here was he sent me the questionnaire and said, can you evaluate it? And I evaluated it at the sentence level and sent it back, but I said, you know, without knowing what the theory is and what you're trying to do, there's no way to say whether this questionnaire is adequate. And so he sent me back the paragraph that I sent you, which is basically, well, it's a social support argument, and if you've got resources, you can do better. But that doesn't say how. Yeah, right. In life, yeah. Okay, so now here we do finally get, who do you, think about the people who support you to stay healthy. All right, that's something. We're getting to the, what Ed wanted to ask.
I feel like there was no criteria for like stay healthy. What do you mean? Like
Yes.
motivates you to go to the gym or like takes you to your doctor's appointment?
Now later on, they have some specific things, but I have problems with those too. But you're absolutely right. This question is about, I don't know, it leaves, one of the things that you typically don't want to do is to leave the interpretation in the hands of the respondent, because each respondent will interpret things differently. So you want to tend to push them towards a common understanding, and this one just does not do that. Sorry? Yeah.
So in that, in the psychology literature, you wouldn't want to just know the names, but also what roles. Are they trainers? Are they doctors? Are they family members? That's going to tell you a lot more about, where they're accessing health-related support.
And you can ask them directly what functions they are providing for you. What support are they giving you? Now, who they are, trainers and so on, that is asked later on, although not quite as well as we'd like. So then, this person is not EPT at RedCap, which is the survey software they're using. So they don't know. So what they've done is they've taken all the answers to all the previous questions, and now they show up here, including duplicate names and including blank spaces where people didn't fill out all the names. And then they ask the respondent to remove the duplicates and to remove the blank things. That's nuts. It can be done by the software. That's true. Yeah. So the person might have given extra names, but they're excluded. Yeah.
Is there a particular software that you prefer? Like this is just
Well, RedCap is what everybody in health uses.
really?
Yeah, and qualtriics is what everybody else uses. So I think qualtriics is more powerful, but RedCap has some special capabilities that are good for health, including, I don't know, encrypted data and stuff like that. But I checked. Oh, yeah. Yes, okay. Yeah. And I think there's some others because it's kind of tuned towards health kinds of stuff. As I'm going to say, but I checked with a RedCap user who does ego network analysis. And she says, this is not a problem. This RedCap handles this just fine. So I've communicated that to my friend. Social support. Okay, here we are. And I think maybe the idea here is that how can you even talk about social support if you're not asking the traditional set of items? So they're covering their bases by asking this, even though they might prefer the network questions for this. Health habits. Have you done any of the following to try to improve your health in the last 3 months? Okay, here the last 3 months, maybe I'm willing to go with, if somehow that's a magical number that they need. Have you tried to cut back on smoking? That seems okay. I don't have a problem with that. Have you exercised at least 3 times a week? Now that one. Right. Right. I mean, why not say at least something like, I have increased the number of times I've exercised a week, or ask them for how much more they've increased or whatever, but just exercise 3 times a week, it's just like, that probably came from some general thing that's, the US government says that you ought to exercise for half an hour 3 times a week or something, but it's not tuned to this population. Have you regularly taken your medications? Again, to improve your health, maybe it should be more like cut back on smoking. Have you gotten better at taking all your medications? Have you tried to make sure to get all your medications? Have you attended all doctor appointments? Yeah.
They should ask, like, I don't know, something about eating habits.
Yeah. This is a question
They
that,
wanted to know about health in this population, young people.
they are, yeah. The oldest one is about 40.
Yeah. These things taken from a general social support.
Yeah, it's like taking lock, stock, and barrel and putting into the survey. Yeah.
Easier to ask people maybe instead of saying, have you attended, all of this, or have you, roughly taken all your medications? You can say, how many days in the past month have you been required to take medication, and how many of those days did you actually take that
Yes.
medication? So that would give you a percentage then. And same thing for doctor's appointments. How many appointments did you have scheduled in the last month, and how many did you actually make?
Yes.
Right?
That's
Because
nice.
again, do you make most or all of your doctor's appointments? If I miss one, I can say yes. If I miss, 50%, if that's my certificate, I can still say yes.
Yeah.
I just think it's limiting the options that.
Yeah, and the other approach is if you didn't want to do that, is you could just ask them about their intention. So have you been trying, is this been a priority for you to try and improve the number of times you go to doctors? But also, besides being obviously taken from something else, these are not specific to their problems. I would want to find out what are the things that NFL players fail to do that they need to do for their health, and then put those in here. Which is,
Well, they can have.
no, I mean, what is CTD? Okay. Okay.
There's no questions about any of the manifestations of that.
Yes.
So do you have, how frequently do you have headaches? How much are you blowing up at the people around you? All of that kind of stuff.
Wouldn't that be kind of risky for an NFL player, though, to say these are the headaches that we have? Because if it gets out, they're in trouble. As far as they might get cut from a team or something like that if they're starting to have health issues.
Well, that's very interesting that you say that. There's an interesting thing here. It's an ego network study. They don't need to know their names. But I have a feeling that the reason why there's no outcome variables here and why they're asking the name is that being a medical doctor, what he's going to do is he's going to go measure the guy. He's going to actually go give him a physical exam and then tie that to these things so that the outcomes are actually real medical ones and not self-reported ones. I'm just guessing. Okay.
So what about survey fatigue? That was in our reading. right?
Yeah.
So how much of an issue is that with these things? How many people start surveys and then just say, screw this? Because
Well, if you're using the Mechanical Turk, let me tell you, a lot of them, after a while, you can see that the quality just goes down. I think fatigue is a huge problem. I think you defeat fatigue in the same way that you handle response rates, which is that whatever the setting is, this whole network, you go to the organization, you give your pitch to everybody, you get support from management above, you constantly interact with them and talk to them about the study, and then when they're not answering right away, you keep hounding them on it. And so you make it so that it's clear that it's important, how much you need it, and why it's important, and what it's going to yield. It's so great. And you also give them a reward for doing things well. Like in this one, at least, it was kind of nice. Did you see that at the end, maybe that's why the name is listed too. Actually it's at the beginning, wasn't it? It says here, your email, so we can send you your social network picture. So you get a little something out of it. Actually, that can be valuable, and it's surprising how many times people will take a survey, and Ed, you mentioned this just the other day, and having finished filling out the survey, not having gotten any results, they say, "Thank you very much. I learned so much about my network and what I need to be doing at work." Do you remember any more details on that?
Oh, I done this study that looked like going through a phone book. I mean, it was hundreds of people, and they gave me 8 pieces of data about each one, and huge support from the people around them. We were pests every few days. It was, but I got a call from a manager, and she said, just out of the blue, and I expected it to be a complaint. And what she said was, in filling out your survey, I realized that I'm not very strategic about my relationships at work, and I need to think through who I'm building relationships with. It's kind of gratifying.
Yeah. It's, for some reason, it's enlightening. It's not just, and of course, more than filling out the survey, but getting a diagram it helps. But also, now, for example, there's a guy named Rob Cross who does these things, and he's automated this process so that the moment somebody finishes their survey, a machine goes and analyzes their network and sends it back to them. It gives them a picture, and it says things like, "We noticed that you only have ties to about 20% women. Don't you think there are some women that you're probably omitting? We noticed that only 19 of your ties are to upper management. That might be an area in which you might want to develop new ties." It's really a helpful thing that way. All right, so we've kind of covered most of this stuff. I just wanted to point out quickly that, one is very tempted to get ratings data. Like you give a roster and you say, how much do you like this person on a scale of 1 to 7? And how often do you talk to this person? Every day, every 2 weeks, whatever. And they're great, but they're also very time consuming, and they take a lot of cognitive effort because you have to actually react to each one and then assign a number, which is not a natural thing to do. Check boxes are way faster. So if you can get away with, if your research needs are answered by being able to just check the names of the people that you consider a friend, those are faster. Okay? And then the one other question is whether you do things alter-wise or question-wise. Alter-wise means they've given you the name of somebody, you put the name up, and then you say, what gender is this person? How old is this person? What race is this person? What department is this person? Everything about that person. And then you go and show them another alter name and ask them all the same questions. The question-wise approach is where you ask a question like, how old are each of the following people that you mentioned? And then you give them ages. Nobody really knows which one is best. If you read the Marsden paper, there's research that suggests that some studies favor one, some studies favor the other. I think it comes down to what you want the person to be doing. I like the alter-wise because it's a complete picture of the person. You're really putting the person in mind and thinking about them as a whole. The problem with it is that some of your criteria as a respondent might change as you go along. It might be better to ask, if, let's say friendship, for example, who are your friends? And now you're doing a comparative thing. You see all the names and you say, well, this is more of a friend than this one. This was less of a friend. But if you had asked friendship alter-wise, by the time you get to the end of the survey, you might have a looser definition of friendship than you did at the beginning. Okay, so we be quiet now, and we start playing with data. So we're going to import the class data, and we'll deal with a bunch of issues. We'll show you some Excel tricks for bringing things in. I'll show you some other ways of bringing in data, and we're going to impute missings. And if we have time, which is extremely doubtful, we will do some data management kinds of stuff, including playing with the height data. So let's take a break, 7 minutes, and then we come back.
So, because the study that I'm thinking about is getting bigger in my mind,
Yeah.
could I do like the pretest as my paper topic?
Yeah.
And do you need IRB for a pretest?
Nope.
Ah,
You don't need it even for the class project.
okay. All right. I mean, if I do this, I want to do it once, right? Like, I'm not gonna ask them to let me do it for a project and then go back and do like the big thing that I wanna do. But the pre-test seems much more manageable.
Sure, well, how big a pretest are you talking?
I don't know, that's a good question. I don't know how big a pretest should be.
Yeah.
I mean, you're pre-testing the population that you want to do the real test on, right?
Yeah, unless you wanted to save them and just do a pretest on a different population.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't matter, does it have to be like a certain percentage of your target population or something?
No, it's really more in terms of absolute terms. I think you'd want to have less than 25 and you don't really see much going on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it can be hard to find any structure. So I would go with 25 or more.
And it can be anybody.
Yeah, if it's a part of a group.
If it's part of
Unless you're doing an egocentric study, then it can be randomly sampled.
a
But if I were you, I would do the sociocentric. It's what most of the course is about. It's good to get that down first.
Okay. All right.
All right. Yes. Yeah, yeah. That is the question. That is the hardest question. I don't think we'll be considering it much anymore, although I'll give lots of examples of these. But what we could do is just meet at some point. I don't have office hours, but you just send me an email, and I'm here Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and then often the other days too.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to ask you about sort of struggling with the NSF proposal that are right. They want to list variables.
Yeah. Somebody needs help in getting in. What's the pattern? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I don't know.
Both of them. It's a mystery. I mean, I swear.
Oh, you mean our
Both
class
of them.
survey?
Yeah, class survey. Oh, you were asking about NFL survey?
Yeah, well, all of the above, but no. With the NFL one, some people got that message that you've already taken it. So that's why I thought.
I see that. Gotcha.
Then on the other one,
Mm-hmm.
you are in there, but with blank data.
My guess is knowing
No, I would just put
They
one of
sometimes
these in,
use
and I would highlight the right-hand side.
when I took the second one, because I didn't know anybody in their height, I just left it blank. Must have like wiped it out the first one. Possible. Because it could be associated with the
that is
same
what
email
happened.
address.
Yeah. No, I think, so somehow in the second one you was all white, but in the first one you did the answer
You're
some.
doing a study?
And so I grabbed those.
Yeah, so my boyfriend teaches in the Patterson School of Diplomacy and International Relations. So it's like a terminal
But you were
master's degree.
smart
They've got
enough to
two
know
cohorts, so like 70 students total at any given time. So, I mean, I've got to get approval from the director of the program, right? So, I mean, like a social support, I'm interested in like a social support in that program, right? And I'm working with Andy Pilney, who's actually going to be here for that class that he's not going to be here. I'm meeting with him like every 2 weeks, and he's working with me sort of on this bigger project. Well, maybe I can pre-test.
But I would think that.
Because he just said, I want to do the study right,
Well-being.
but it's big for like,
Might be like a.
so maybe I could do that. He said it's gonna be free, maybe I can do a pre-test for you. And then if it works well, then you can do a similar study of your program. What do you think? Really? Yeah, so I've heard actually pretty bad things about that program.
You're in which program?
Very interesting. Right, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, so, really? Well, student success is like such a thing here. Yeah, undergraduate student success.
I study, well, marketing is my field, so I study innovation.
See, at least you were able to, because I was told that was very discouraged in your department. Yeah.
Basically, R&D.
Fascinating.
Somehow I totally missed the fact that you're really tall.
I sit down a lot.
Yeah.
Even like
I think my perception of how tall people are was skewed. So my boyfriend's like 6'2",
Right,
so I just like start there, and then like basically.
That's interesting. It's like a anchoring.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm like, yeah.
I make adjustments for like whether a person's male or female. So I see somebody who's really tall woman, and I think, yeah, but really she's shorter than that because it's just the unusualness of a tall woman.
Yeah.
But so I really underput Andy. It turns out she's 5'10", but I put her as like, I don't know, less than that. 5'10". That's very tall. Yes. How many standard deviations above the mean are you in Korea? Oh, okay.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
In that case, I wonder if they would support network study, right? If they know that there are so many problems.
So while we're waiting, if you guys want to download these 4 data files, you could put them into the UCINet data files folder.
So does your website stay up all the time?
It
Like,
stays up all the time,
We'll have access to this forever?
forever. Yeah. And actually, if you look on the left over there, you see how we can go back to like 2013.
Right, I guess that's
Yeah.
self-evident. If I had looked. All right, so where are they again? In
This is for
today's-
today, yeah. So we got main class survey, the height survey. The height data I pre-processed because it's a little bit more involved, but I'll show you what I did. So actually, yeah, why don't I just, while we're kind of getting together, I'm gonna bring that one down. Where is my UCINet data folder? Here it is. So up at the top is where is the data as it came in. So we've got people that say 5.3, and then we've got people that have 1.63, and we have people who used, let's see, single quotes, and people who use double quotes. Are you very happy?
Well,
About 4'6". Whoever said 6 feet though for me, oh crap, I'm looking
someone said 6
Mm.
feet. Awful. Everybody overestimated me.
Let me see.
If I put it, that's really.
Well, we don't know one another, right?
Yeah.
People have really good perception of my height.
So then what I did is I converted all of those to inches. And I spared you, we could have done this in class, but this is just the outer formula. And then I have an inner formula here. Enable editing. I don't know whether people know Excel well enough to know how to use named formulas. So I have this inner formula here that is this mess down here. So I thought that was just too much to do in class. So this one I did for you. But the others we're just going to do together. Okay. So, so look at this. Somebody says that I'm 70 inches, that's 6 foot, that's 5'10", another 5'10", another 5'10". I'm 5'7 3/4". So what I'm thinking, and I had predicted this ahead of time, is I'm thinking I'm the professor of this class. I have a certain amount of authority and so on. You've overestimated my height as a result. I wonder if graduate students get seen as shorter than they are. And assistant professors like in between. I don't know. Okay, so 5'7 3/4". I'm 5'8" is the way I think of it. I only know the 3/4 because I went to the doctors last year and they said, you're shrinking. You have lost 1/4 of an inch.
That happens. I used to be 5.
All right, so that's one data set. Now let's go up and get the other data sets. I'm going to get the main class survey. You have no doubt already gotten down. And so we open it in Excel. And it gives you a bunch of junk that we're going to ignore. It also has 3 headers, right? And if you go further to the right, well into the survey, you can see that the top header is like a question number. And then the next header actually tells you something. So this is how often you typically interact with this person, and this is Camila, and it didn't like the enye. And actually there's a way in Qualtrics that when you download the data, I downloaded it as CSV, but if you choose something else, TSV or something, it gets it right. So just a thing to remember. And then the next line below that is, I have no idea what that is, but it's useless. So I'm going to delete the first row, and you should do this too. And then I'm going to delete what is now the second row. And now I find the first real question, which is column R. And this is the question, what is your name? And so here we have all the names. And if you notice, actually, I'm here at the top, and I'm also down here.
You deleted the first and second rows?
Well, it's in the original, it's the first and the third. So, but now it's the second one, so, yeah. Notice that this first time I occur is a preview. So that was me testing the survey. So I'm going to delete that line as well. So we delete the preview line. And now we're good. Now the next question is column S. And it is, who did you know before this semester? And there's a lot of interesting stuff in here because people people interpreted that differently. Notice how Qualtrics handles this. In a single field, it puts all the people that Jiangman mentioned. And here's Andy and all the people that she mentioned. She knows a lot of people. Okay. So this format that Qualtrics is using is particularly easy for UCINet. What I'm going to do is grab, I'm going to ignore the first row. I'm going to grab the first 2 columns, highlight them. I'm going to press Control-C to copy them to the clipboard. And then I'm going to create a new sheet because I like things neat and clean. and I'm going to paste it into here. That's no problem. So going back to this, I went to columns R and S, which is what's your name, and then who did you know. I highlighted both columns.
No, I made the mistake of expanding.
Well, okay,
I still have it.
we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So then I copied it over to sheet 1, and I pasted it here. But now, the thing to realize is that the first one is great, but the second column has got all the names in it. We'd really rather them be in separate cells, right? So what you do is you highlight column B, you go up to data, and you do text to columns, which is such a convenient thing. And we want to use delimited because all those names are separated by commas. And next, and we want to choose a comma. And then press finish. And now every name is its own cell. Okay, do I need to catch anybody up? Something looks, how come you only have one name there and you got a giant column?
I expanded S. Okay, it worked. It's
Okay.
just one field is expanded.
All right, so now this, I'm going to rename this sheet Acquaint. And we've done one. And, you know, normally I would just go through all of them, but this time, just to, proof of concept, I'm going to bring this into UCINet now. So I'm going to highlight everything out to the farthest column that's used, which is M. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. I use Control-C. I'm going to start up UCINet. What was that?
Normally, I would go through all of it.
Yes.
Before you do anything else, you would make sure that that works.
Yes. Right. So, and although what I actually meant was that I would normally convert all of our network questions and then go to UCINet because I want to stay in Excel and stay in that mindset. So, I can clean the data easier stuff. But because in this class setting, I just want to sort of show that's going to work, give a little motivation. I'm going to now paste this into the DL editor. That's the fourth from the left. Okay. Fourth from the left. Data language. And I'm going to paste it, Control V. And you know, when you do this kind of stuff, as Joe was pointing out, you need to look around and see if things look like they make sense. Like Camila mentions nobody. This is for acquainted before this semester started. And by acquainted, I had said that it had actually met in person. And so we have never met, she has not met anybody here before. So that's the right answer. That's a blank line for good reason. Sorry? She doesn't know herself. That's true, yes. So that may be a psychological flaw, but not a data flaw. Okay? All right. Now, under data format, we need to say, what format is this? And this format is something that's called a node list, a node list 1. What that means is that the first name listed is the respondent, and then there's a list of all the nodes that respondent is connected to. So it's a list of nodes. And the node list 1 means that it's a one mode kind of thing, meaning that the sender of the tie is the same kind of entity as the receiver of the tie. It's all ties among one set of entities, one mode. So now the one thing I want to make sure is that we want to sort this alphabetically. It's going to make all of the different questions that we do all have the rows and columns be in the same order, which is crucial. So I will now press the save button. And I'm going to call this, wait, yeah, I pressed the save symbol. I'm going to call it equate. And you should get a 19 by 19 matrix that has ones and zeros. Some people are acquainted with themselves, not everybody is. That's fine. Most network analyses will completely ignore self-ties, so it really doesn't matter what's in there. And let's see, I can look at my own data and say, who did I know here? I knew Andy before the semester. I knew Dinah. I knew Jason. I knew Jungman. I knew Jin Miao, Joe, and Sung Wan. So that looks about right. And you can look for your own data and see, does it make sense? Joe only knew himself in this. So let's see what's going on with that. Let's go back to the Excel data and see, wrong Excel data. Joe, Dinah. Now you tell me. I have to go look at it. Actually, Steve, we're playing a trick on you, and it's there. Oh, yes. Gotcha. Okay. So, all right, looks like this method is working. Great. Let's go back to our Excel file, and we'll go to the main tab, and we're going to find the next question. Now, the next question is how often you interact with people. And this kind of question is handled differently by Qualtrics. So this is how often do you interact with Amanda, and how often do you interact with Andy, how often do you interact with Camila, and so on. So they're all separate questions. This is a matrix, basically. So what I want to do is grab all of this. I think I've got it right. And go all the way to the last interact question, which is here. So that's column AL. I copy it to the clipboard. I create a new tab. I paste it in. Then I realize, I wish I had kept the names of the people who are the respondents. So I'm going to highlight A and then right-click and insert a column before A. I'm going to put the labels of the people here. And I go back, and I need to find those labels of the people. And here I take that column R, which says you, what's your name? And I grab all of those names, copy, grab all those names, Control C, and I go to sheet 2, and I drop it in. Oops, I dropped it too high, so I'm going to remove it, put it down one, and that looks good. I'm slowing down here to make sure that everybody's here. Now, our column headings, they're supposed to be people's names, but they've got all those extra verbiage. So we got to remove that verbiage. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight this column, this row, because that's all I want to work with. I'm going to use Control H, which is search and replace. So I'm going to search and replace, and now I've forgotten what it looks like. I'm going to close that again so you can look at one of these. You notice how it's got all these words, and then it ends with a dash and a space before the name. So let me highlight again, Control H. I'm going to find everything up to a dash and a space. And then I'm going to replace that with nothing. And there we are, only names. Now, did everybody see how we did that? Now, here's where I have failed. When you download from Qualtrics, you have a choice for either downloading the actual labels of your responses or the numbers. And I should have done both, because both are convenient. So now I don't have the numbers here, and I don't think I posted those either. Nope, height data, I didn't do it. So we don't have the numbers. So that leaves us with a painful task of we could Control H each of these to a number. Oof, do I really want to do that? I suppose I could. I think I'm just going to download a new one and post it real quick. That will allow people to catch up. So I'm going to go to my Qualtrics account for a moment. And I'm going to download the data again.
The main data?
The main data, yeah. Only this time with numbers instead of labels. And I want class survey. And I want data. I want to export. Well, good. This way you see how to export too, in case you didn't know that. Export data. Oh, there's the TSV thing, which would actually have brought down the enye correctly. I'm going to use numeric values this time, and I download. It names the files based on the time and day, so it won't overwrite the old one. So I will save this. And then I'm going to go to the website here, and I'm going to upload that data set for you. Add files. Speedy upload. So, two nodes walk into a button. Here we go. Well, please try again later. Really? Okay. Now it's up there. And how do I know which one it is? It's the 1142 one. So if you would go to that page and download the 1142 version of the class survey, I would appreciate it.
Right.
Ah, the date, sure, yeah. February 13th.
You need
And to download it, you click this little down arrow. Okay, so do the down arrow, then you should be able to see this version. Now, this version is not nearly as nice in many ways. So for example, in the question you, what is your name? It's like name 20, name 14. But it is helpful for the next question, the interact question, because it's got the actual numbers. So actually, to make these as similar as possible, I'm going to delete the first row. And then I'm going to delete what is now the second row, all that import stuff. And now I'm going to find the first interact question, which is right there. And highlight. Oh, yeah. Very smart, yes. So, yeah. So this now, what is now the second row, it says preview right there. That was me previewing the data, so we should get rid of that one too. Delete. And now, finally, we can go to the first interact question, which is T, column T. Through AL. And it looks like it goes down to around row 20. Control C. And then I'm going to go back to the other sheet. That's the wrong one. The other sheet, this one. And I'm just going to paste right here. How nice. The names, they had already been, do a Control Z. Oh, you didn't have it already?
Yeah, because it's fine, it's fine. I can do this later.
What did I? Okay. So, we're missing Valbona. Okay. Now, some people are wondering where I got these names from. I got them from the previous page. So let me just catch you up on that. If you had gone up to the top here where it says interact, and grabbed all of those names, you see how it says interact and then and then the Amanda Sloan at the end? We're going to grab all of that. Those of you that already have this do not need to do this again. The rows will not be in the same order as the columns. Right, but because the rows are in order of when you fill out the survey. The columns are going to be different, but we will deal with that in UCINet. So I'm going to copy this over to sheet 2. I'm putting them up here. And now, Christy, do you have this?
I do, with the numbers. It's fine. You go on.
Okay. Well, I'm going to press Control H. And I'm going to change asterisk, that means everything, up to the dash and the space. Replace it with nothing. So that will leave me just the names. And so now I've got a matrix. It's not quite right in the sense that the rows are in different order from the columns, but we'll deal with that. Okay? I'm going to rename the sheet interact. I'll go back to the survey now and find the next network question, which is, as the semester goes on, who do you think you'll be interacting with more? So I start at the second line. I grab everybody. Control C. I create a new tab, new blank page. I copy it into the second column. The reason is I want to put the respondent names in the first column. So I Control V that. I go back to get the respondent names, which I could get from any one of these pages. Like I could get it from here. And put it here. So while I get some power, see if you've got what I've got. Okay, we've done, we need to rename the sheet. And this one was like, I'm just going to call it more. I'm going to interact with more. And then there's the last question. The last question is height. We actually have two separate surveys. Some people answered the first one, second. So I did all this for you. So if we just open that first Excel file that we did, it was just called class data, and just grab the bottom part here. It has all the ages, all the heights in inches. Thank you. By the way, I put a little X at the bottom corner just so I know where the matrix ends. It doesn't affect it. And I'm going to copy this back to the other spreadsheet that we've been working on. And I'm going to put a plus sign here and drop it. But that was a dumb way to drop it because those were all formulas. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that. If I go up to Home and choose Paste, I can paste values. And that will paste just the values. So let me rename that. This is height. Now, does anybody need me to do that again? No one wishes. Yes. Okay. So what I did was I went to the other spreadsheet that was called class data, which we had opened at the beginning. It's got something at the top that says scroll down, so obediently you scroll down to where it says converted to inches. Then you highlight everything. And copy it to the clipboard, Control C. Then I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet that we've been working on over here, and I made a new tab, and then I simply pasted it in. I made the same mistake again. Every time I make the same mistake, which is that you can't simply paste it in. What you have to do, I'm going to Control Z, is you have to go to the Home tab here, choose Paste, and then choose Paste Values. It means don't copy the formulas, copy the values. And then rename that height. Only I'm going to delete this one because I already have it. So now we have 4 networks. Let's consider what they are. The acquaint is a very typical kind of relational state. Who are you acquainted with? Interact. How much do you interact with people? It's kind of a relational events thing. More, it's who do you think you will end up interacting with more? It's kind of a relational state type of thing. And height is a relational state that's of the mental kind. It's not who do you have a certain reaction to, but it's who do you know about? Who do you know something about? The cognitive kind of a thing. I know that Andy knows about hierarchical linear models. I know that she is 5'10", that kind of stuff. Okay, so now we've got these 4 relations, and we're going to move them into UCINet, but we got to deal with the Valbona problem. So I noticed that height has Valbona at the bottom. That's good. What does more have? More has no Valbona. I'm going to add Albona. Let's see, Sulkai. You know that? Sulkai, there we go. And let's find interact. We'll add her there too. And it's important that you spell it the same way with the same capitals every time. And then acquaint. It shouldn't, but I think you're right about that. Yeah. And you shouldn't be tempted by changing Camila's name once. I mean, you got to remember to change it everywhere if you're going to do it. I choose to. I like Umaata. Yeah. So okay, I guess I don't need to save this. I'm now going to move. I'm going to start with acquaint and move towards height. Did we do acquaint already? Yes, we did. We've done acquaint already. So now we're going to go to interact, and we're going to highlight everything, copy to the clipboard, go to UCINet, go to the DL editor, can I share that file in the website? Sure. Actually, the one called class data that we already downloaded, that has everything in it. So if you just go to that one, it's got all the same tabs. Yeah. So I am also recording this, yes. Also the screen. Yeah, okay. You have this dim view of me. It's like, but I bet you're only recording the voice, right? No, I'm doing the whole thing as it's supposed to be done. Okay, so now I go to the DL editor, and I get rid of what was there before. That was acquaint. And then I Control V and paste in. Now this one is a matrix, right? So it's got rows and columns and numbers inside. So it's not a node list. And notice that matrix doesn't appear here. It's because it's above that. I have to go up. Matrix. And then, of massive importance, sort alphabetically. Because the other stuff is sorted alphabetically. And if this one isn't, they're not going to match up with each other. So we sort alphabetically. We save. And this is called interact. Looks good. Notice that it did not put zeros in for where there was nothing, because 0 would mean that you don't interact with them a lot or something. Or actually, you know, that reminds me. A 1 here means that's the person you interact with most. And a 6 is someone you interact with very little. We're going to have to deal with that, because that's just the way it was organized in the questionnaire. So why don't we deal with that right now? I will go to transform and go to reverse. So reverse, transform, reverse. I put in interact, and by default, it's going to call it interact rev. I guess that's okay. What the hell? We'll leave that alone. And we will run it. So now I need to check it. I know my own answers. So I know that I interact the most in this class with Jin Miao. So, and that's my biggest number, is a 5. Okay, so that looks right to me. And let's see. So, and Taylor, you have some interaction, but I guess very low with sung. Yeah, okay. So that's been reversed properly. We just have to remember now to use the reversed version and not the original version. Close that. Back to our spreadsheet, we have the more data. So we grab all of that. Copy to the clipboard. Go to UCINet. Go to the DL editor. Get rid of what was there before by pressing this plus sign up at the top left. And it's empty. Now, sometimes it won't let me paste here. I'm going to try it. Control V. Yeah, it didn't do it. You have to do this little dance where you go somewhere else, and then you come back. And then you can paste. Although, that's wrong, isn't it? That is wrong. So, what is it? Is it in the original? Yes, it's in the original. We never expanded these to separate cells. So let's highlight all of B, and then we go to data, and then we go text to columns, delimited, next, comma, it's separating it out nicely, finish, and there we are. These are all in separate cells now. So now I redo this process. Control C, I go to UCINet, throw away that thing, I Control V in, now I've got the right data, but this is not a matrix. This is that node list format. So up to node list. Sort it alphabetically, everything else looks good. I'm going to save this. This is to be called more. Yes, because I did this last night. You think I just wing this stuff? No, I prepare. So 19 rows, 19 columns, that's good. That's what we expected to see. Alphabetical order again. All good. The only one that remains is height. So I'm going to just Control A to highlight everything, and then Control C, copy to the clipboard. Then I go to UCINet, the DL editor. I throw away what was there before. I paste it in. And this, again, is the matrix. This is not a node list. And I must sort alphabetically so that everything is in the same order, especially the rows and the columns of the same matrix. And I save this, and I call it height. Okay. So I have a feeling I've lost most people. I am perfectly willing to just run through all of that again. Or if you think it's a better use of time, I can just move on a little bit, and then you guys can play with this later. Okay, I don't want to do that again. Hated that. Okay, so one thing when you read in data, you probably want to look at it, just partly to just make sure that it looks normal. So I'm going to go to the QD button here. And I'm going to take Acquaint and open it. And let's see. Okay, just before we even look at whether there's any errors in the data, just what do you think? Is it, what's the structure there? How do you interpret this? Where is he? San Juan, yes, highly central person here. Yes. At least you're not Ed. I mean, so it looks like there's a core, really, and you would think that these would probably be the people that belong to the management department, because that's who mostly is here. And I think that's going to be the case. There is a little technique that we cover in detail later, but I'm just going to show it to you now because it's fun. It's an analysis technique, and it's called K-cores. And it's a way of getting rid of the fuzz around a core. So Valbona is fuzz, Joe is fuzz, and the core is in here. So if I go to analysis and choose K-cores, I'll explain. It's the cores that's really the key. It's finding cores, and the K refers to how tight the core is, how core the core is. So notice it's colored the nodes by core. Now over here on the right under nodes, it's created a new variable. If I do the drop down, it's called K-core. Now a zero core refers to all those people who are connected to zero others. So if I click this one off, Ed disappears, right? That's it for Ed. Voted off the network. After I get rid of Ed, I could get rid of the onesies. So that's going to be Joe, Valbona, and actually it's going to be Lauren too, because once you get rid of Valbona, then she's a onesie. So if I get rid of the one here, yes, you're gone. Forget it. You can't, remember in Netro, you cannot undo. Oh, okay. Yeah, so because you had two ties to people that are still in, you're still there. Now, here come the twos. All right, there go the threes. I skipped. I took out the threes now. Amanda, the lone four. And we have our major core, although you see that there's this one green. Yeah, so you might at this point. Normally, you might use this as a data sort of reduction tool, and you might just use it just to reduce the people who are really not well connected. So you might keep everybody from the two core and above. But if you really want to know who is the actual deepest core of cores, that's these people here. This is acquaintance, that's right. That's true. Now, I have to point out too that this is not symmetric, which is interesting. So at least Andy and Jason recognize that they know each other. But Julia here says that she was acquainted with Joe LaBianca from before the semester. I did not know this. Right. Of the class. I knew when I wrote that question that I probably should have made it in bold and then explained what I meant by it, but I did not do that. So here we have some now unreciprocated data. Yes. I would point out, however, that your fellow guest, Camila, did not make this mistake. So, just saying. Where is Camila? Okay, up here, yeah. Okay, so we've looked at one network. While we're in here, we could, I'm going to put in everybody here in status. We could now bring in another network. I'm going to do the open with a U here. Mhm. Sort of connectedness that you wanted to see, yeah.
Yeah, so the network is really just, I mean, like you said before, a network isn't, I don't know, like you said, networks are not real in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you decide about it. But this is the people who belong to this class. So that part is kind of real. And then we're looking at the structure of the network within that and saying that there's really some people who are kind of core connected and others who are really kind of peripheral at the moment. Well, not even at the moment, back before the semester started, right? We could look at, what's the other one? It's the interact. Now, I want to point out that if you go back to the Rels tab, notice that both relations are still here. We've just added to what's in here. I could go to the other one. Did that change anything? Yeah, it did, okay. So they're both here. Let me hit the lightning bolts. And the colors are still from the previous analysis. So they might be different for this tie. What got added here? The tie from Lauren to Jin Miao, I think, appeared. No, it didn't. It was always there. Oh, it's Valbona to Jin Miao. So for the interact, how do we have data for you for interact? We shouldn't have data for you at all. That doesn't make sense. See, I question that because you did not answer the survey yet. I mean, before I grabbed the data.
You grabbed the data from the numeric survey you downloaded.
Oh, and she had that. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Okay. So these are little things that we have to watch out for. Oh, I don't know if you noticed in the survey, but in the column for what's your name, one of the choices was enter name here or something like that. It wasn't a real name. And nobody chose that, obviously, because nobody's called enter name here. So it didn't affect anything, but it's the kind of thing you need to watch for to make sure that all of those questions have the exact same set of names in them. I screwed that up. Okay, now this is looking very much like the acquaintance network. We could, though, it's a value data set. And actually, I read in the wrong one, because didn't we reverse this one? Yes, so I should have done open with a U, and then chosen interact rev, which is the reversed one. So that our bigger numbers means more ties, means more interaction. And then I can take this thing over here, it says greater than 0, and say my criteria for showing a line should be more than just greater than 0. It should be greater than 1. Stronger tie. Greater than 2. Greater than 3. Maybe I'll do the lightning bolt. That really helped not at all. How about greater than 4? That's really not that helpful. And greater than 5. Now we've got these two different components over here. We've got the two people who are working together right now on a project.
I pointed.
Let me lower this. There, see, I pointed at you at a lower level. Yeah. That's funny. A lot of your ties are reciprocated. Oh, none of them. Oh my God. So it may be that you are somewhat solitary, and for you, your interactions with Julia and Camila are like a lot and worth porting down. But for them, since they're interacting constantly, like the amount that they interact with you is hardly noticeable. Let's see what happens if we lower the value. Still not reciprocated. Okay, I think there's going to be some discussion later on behind closed doors on this one. All right, now, another thing we could have done is put all these together. So if I go to data here, I could go to join, and rather than joining rows or columns, I'm going to join whole matrices together into a single data set. So I could put in join, and I could put in quaint, or I could use I tend to type rather than look it up. Quaint, and then there was interact, rev, and then there was more, and then there was height. And the output of this is going to be called something like all relations. And now you see a quaint, you see interact rev, you see more, you see height, and they're all together. And we could run analyses on all of them simultaneously this way. I want to look at the height data for a moment. I'm going to go to what's called the CLI, the command line interface. And I'm going to display, just showing you some of these commands, reminding you that they exist. Display height. And that shows me the height matrix. And notice that we have numbers down the diagonal because people listed their own height. And that the numbers down the diagonal are kind of like, those are the truths, right, as opposed to the perceptions. So I'm going to grab the diagonal and put it into a separate variable. And then I'm going to compare it to people's perceptions. So I will say something like the truth equals get diagonal of height. So that says, find a data set called height, pull out the main diagonal, and create a new data set called truth that contains just those values. And those are parentheses, by the way, they're not brackets. So I press enter, and then I could display truth now. Truth is on display right there. And we have heights for several people. And let me just check mine is right. Yes. If you round up, I'm 68 inches. And
Is that with shoes or?
no, that's not with shoes. No. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I am a little. It's weird, you know. I set the mirror in the car in the morning, and when I come back home, I have to change the mirror because I'm not as tall. I'm like down here. Okay, so now I want to compare this with what people said about each person. Let's display height again. So let's look at Amanda. Andy says 64, which is an incredibly good guess. Christy says 65. Yeah, Ed says 64. It's kind of frightening, really, how good everybody is. We want to compare that column with the truth. Well, actually, why don't we average what everybody's estimates are? So the average would be the column averages, right? So I could do this. I could say display the WAVage. That means the within matrix average, WAVage of height by column. I want the average for each column. And there it is. But I want to compare this against the truth, and the truth is a column, and this is a row, and it's kind of a mess. So I need to make this row into a column. I can do that. Sorry? I could do that, yes. That would make sense because it's kind of unfairly accurate. Let me come back to that. Just because I don't know how to do it. It'll take me a second to remember. So I'm going to say perceived. I before E, except after C. Perceived equals the transpose of the WAVage of height by a column, close. So that says, go find a data set called height. Calculate the average for each column. then transpose that so what used to be a row now becomes a column. And I press enter. And now I should be able to display perceived. Okay, so there's the perceived. I'd like to put them side by side. So I could do something like display join calls of truth and perceived. And there we see. So let's check out the ridiculously tall people. 76 is the truth. Average view 74. Who else is in the 70s? Ed 75, perceived at 73. Done pretty well here. Daniel 75 to 72. I wonder what the correlation is here. So I could probably display correlation of truth and perceived. 0.97. But as Amanda points out, or somebody pointed out, I've got the true in there, so it's a little bit biased. We should eliminate people's own stuff. So what we need to do is just get rid of the diagonal. So I'm going to set something like this. I'm going to say height NA equals set diagonal of height to NA, the missing value. Let's see if that works. Display height NA. No, it set it to zeros. That's an annoying thing for it to have done. Let me try something else. Set it to missing. Display height NA. No, that's a bug. So now I happen to know on UCINet that missing values are coded as 1E38. So it's like the biggest real number it can store in scientific notation. So let me try this again. I'm going to press the up arrow. The up arrow gives me the previous command, and the up arrow again gives me that. Now, instead of missing, I'm going to put in the missing value code, the numeric code, 1E38. And now let's see. I'm going to use the up arrow again to go find my display command. Yeah, and now it's blank. Okay. Yeah. So this was the command here. Height NA is just the name that I chose. And then set the diagonal of the height variable to 1E38, which is just a huge number. It regards anything greater than 1E37 to be missing. So, oh, and by the way, all of these commands are being saved. So if I press save commands here, it's going to create a text file that has every command that we've typed in. So it's sort of like Stata, you can do that, and SPSS with a syntax file, and so on. Right. So now I want to go back to my calculation of the perceived. And here's my calculation of perceived. You know, I could make this easier on you. There we go. A little bit bigger. But I don't want height. I want height NA. That's the one where I got rid of people's own judgments. So perceived is going to be equal to that. And then I'm going to display the correlation of truth with perceived. 0.96. Okay, it's lower, but still extraordinarily good, right? I mean, if you didn't have a measuring stick here, it would be good enough to just have everybody guess the height and then average them. In fact, this comes from a study by a guy named Robin Dawes. The title of the paper is, "What if we measured height with a Likert scale?" And so he does that. He measures everybody's height on the 1 to 5 scale, like very tall, extremely tall, somewhat tall, and he has a large sample and he averages it and then correlates it with the actual height, and it correlates it like over 0.9. It's spectacular. Even if each individual estimate is not very accurate, by aggregating the wisdom of the group, we can get to a very accurate score. Now, it would also be fun to see in this who's actually a good height guesser and who is not. So what we want to do, let me look at height again. And you're 5'10"? Yes, that's hysterical. So edit height. And Lauren, probably 16, right? Maybe 15. That's funny. Wouldn't that be the same? Okay. And are you 15 this way? Yes, you are. I'm just an idiot. Okay. So you are 70 inches tall. Save. And while we're here, we might as well change the truth. That seems bad. Let's just change the truth. Trumpian tactics. So change the truth. 70. Okay. Truth. And now, I want to display height. I want to figure out how to correlate the truth with each person's evaluation. Well, each person's evaluation is a row here. Right? So we want to compare Song's row with the true one. So we're going to have to turn this on its side. So we're going to have to transpose this one too. So T height, transposed height, equals the transpose of height. Display T height. And so now this column here is Jyothi's guess at everybody's height. And so every column here is that. And the truth is one of these two. So now I'm going to show you, and this is, you can only get this in UCINet. Stata doesn't do this. We can correlate all of those with the truth and only with the truth. So I display correlation of T height with truth. And you see how instead of having to see a correlation of every variable with every other variable, I can just have a whole set of variables correlated with one variable, which is misnamed, by the way, but that's truth. So, Amanda, explain yourself. You cannot guess height. Joe is perfect, but on the other hand, Joe only gave two heights. He gave his own height, which he knew was tall, and then somebody else's, which he knew was got to be shorter. So he's a correlation of 1.0. So that one we kind of have to discount. Steve is good, but Lauren is very good. And is she the highest? She is the highest if we ignore Joe. Well done. Now, I would have guessed that short people would not be able to guess height very well, because anything over 6 feet is just tall, right? So, okay, but let's test that theory, because we've got Dinah, 0.932. That's your correlation with the truth. You are really good at doing heights. You're a very good guesser. You may have some kind of, I don't know, ESP. And I would have thought that very tall people might also be not very good. Let's try Daniel. Daniel's very good. So, okay. That's one thing that we're not controlling for, is the fact that some people only guess for a couple of people. Yeah. Anyway, always interesting to see these kinds of things. It's 12:28. So that gives me time to put up, I don't know, 5 or 10 slides. So We'll just stop there. I will post the slides, and I will post this video of everything that we did today. I just have to press F